Hey, you all, guys and girls, Dmitry is here, and I keep bringing you more news and commentary, and there are interesting things happening in Russia and the world, and we'll talk more and more about it. And today I want to comment on Alexander Mercouris and Scott Ritter's latest program. They had a very nice 2 hour show on Russia and the war in Ukraine, and they said some interesting things that I believe they're important and perceptive, very perceptive. They're very smart. But I wanted to correct them on a couple of points. So I will do that, and I will tell you a story of how military people are treated in Russia. That characterizes Russia today very well. So here it goes. And let us start with this follow-up on Daria Dugina's death. The guy in the picture is a war correspondent. He's like a former colonel. And he received an email saying, "Hello from Dugina, you're next." He's, of course, very pro-Russian. He works for one of the most influential Russian newspapers. And he is saying that this is Ukrainian signature. So this is where we should be looking. We want to decide who's to blame. For sure, it's the Ukrainians. So here's a presentation I mentioned at the very beginning of my video in my introduction. So take a listen if you want to understand Russia better.
The Russians themselves, I think, have been astonished by their own success. Even Putin has. And I'm guessing because I don't know what Putin himself is thinking. But I think one of the other things that's happened as a result of the sanctions, well, all that you said, I agree with, by the way, completely agree with, about the fact that, inconveniencing the people would have been much more effective. But one of the other things that held Russia to the West, or rather prevented the break, was this fact that Russians, especially since the late Soviet period, have had this enormous sense of, well, we're not as good as the West. We know we can't really do things as well as the West. If the rest really comes down hard against us, well, everything will fall apart, everything will break down, as it did in the late 80s and early 90s, and as it did again in 1998, and as it almost did in 2008. We've got to find always ways of being on good terms, especially with the Americans, because that's the only real game in town, and we can't trust ourselves. And now look what happens. We impose all those sanctions. We do the absolute extreme of sanctions, and to the Russians' own astonishment, their economy continues to function. The meat is still on the table. The roof is still over the house. The electricity is still running. The gas is still there. The shops are still full. The prices are actually falling at the moment. So this has been revelatory. And of course, you put that all together, success in war, success in economics, you're going to see a very big change in Russia. There's going to be a huge surge in Russian self-confidence of a sort that you haven't seen since the 1960s. I mean, Russia lost its belief in itself a long time ago, actually. But as I said, it's going to start regaining it in a way that we've not seen in the West for a very, very long time.
Let me just add to that real quick. And I agree with you 100%. It's like Russia found their mojo. What was the movie Austin Power? They got their mojo back, baby. And it's real. I mean, you're right. I'm going to say things. I hope I don't insult anybody in Russia, but there was always a sense of Russian national pride, of Russian accomplishment. But at the end of the day, there was a sense of Russian inferiority, that Russia just wasn't as good as the West, that Russia needed the West to be like a big brother to it. And you're 100% right. I don't think there's anybody right now looking to the West. In fact, what's happened now is that the wool's been pulled off the eyes, and people are looking to the West with a greater clarity than they ever have had. I mean, everybody always knew that the West had racist problems, that we had, economic inequalities, there's homeless in America, et cetera. But that was always pushed aside in a similar way that the American people have pushed that aside, on the premise of, yes, but America is the greatest power in the world. We're the shining city on the hill. We can do everything better than anybody. It turns out that maybe we can't. And maybe the Russians are learning that they not only are they good, they're really good.
And this is an excellent fragment, and yeah, it's quite perceptive, I should say. And I wanted to react to something like that. Well, first of all, the main idea is absolutely correct, and I don't think anyone who's got half a brain in Russia would be offended by it, just because it is something that unites all Russians, like the vast majority of Russians, I would say, from extreme pro-Western liberals to the most dyed-in-the-wool nationalist Stalinist. They think that Russia will screw things up, both of them, for different reasons. This has been here with us for the past 300 years. Sense of self-abnegation, inferiority towards the West, which is in many ways justifiable and somewhat true, but not to the degree that Russians believe it is. So when I tell people here that I'm trying to bring people to settle, to come and live here, I am met with a wall of distrust. People asking why would anyone want to come here? Young people want to leave. There is no understanding why. So ingrained in Russian psyche, this painful, humiliating sense of inferiority. These days, some people even feel it towards the Chinese, not just traditionally towards the West. It is a difficult historical legacy, and this we can talk about it for a very long time. But I wanted to correct Alexander and Scott on a couple of points. First of all, there is no sense of victory or euphoria, as they are saying, yet. People haven't realized really what is happening. And the second thing is, let us not underestimate the effect of Western sanctions in Russia, because Russian economy has been affected tremendously. It is true that the expected hyperinflation didn't happen and ruble didn't turn into ruble. But let me show you just on a couple of examples that Russian economy is doing very bad. It is not the end of Russia, most certainly. This sense of victory and euphoria will appear later on, but I'll just show you a couple of things so that you can estimate what's happening in Russia as of today. Let me start with this piece of statistics from Wolf Richter. He's an excellent American commentator on economics and finance. Just look at the headline. New vehicle sales in Russia collapsed by 82% in June. Imagine if new vehicle sales in the US collapsed by 80% in any month. That would mean probably cities burning and people being killed and robbed on every corner. Look at this table. Sales of Toyota cars just plummeted by 95%. Imagine this. Sales of Russian and Korean cars, they're quite bad, but say gas LCV isn't. It's probably the best out of the lot. But look at this, 88%, 93%, 80%, 81%. Just imagine how many dealerships closed, how many people lost their jobs, and not only those who work for these dealerships, those who do things for dealerships, feed them, clean them, to transport these cars, service them, and all that. So I mean, it's really bad. The auto industry was hit the hardest among probably the whole lot, because, say, for example, real estate isn't doing that bad. It's falling, but it's not as bad. Prices of things have really grown noticeably, no doubt. Let me show you this Russian infographic. This is a headline from a Russian newspaper, Izvestia, and it says here that cost of renovation for apartments in Russia rose by 30% in 12 months. There is a breakdown, this little infographic. Construction materials rose by 15 to 10%. Repairs overall rose by, the cost of repairs, renovation, rose by 20 to 15%. And if you start repairing an apartment from scratch, outfitting the apartment from scratch, you pay 25% more than you paid a year ago. So that's quite noticeable. Believe me, people notice. And actually, these are kind of this newspaper is, it's kind of official. So in reality, probably pay even more than that. That's noticeable. It's really noticeable. And then there is this interesting story. It tells you a lot about what's happening in Russia today. There is this fancy restaurant, Magadan, Moscow, and there was a party. Employees of the restaurant, a guy who was standing by the door, guarding the door. It's quite common in Russia. Have people like him. He didn't let a person dressed in a military uniform into the restaurant. Didn't let a military officer full dress uniform. He actually told him to go in through a back door so he doesn't scare away, quote unquote, scare away the guests. You're aware that there is a war on right now, and not letting in a military officer is quite, was taken as a challenge, as an insult, for sure. And it spread like wildfire all over Russian media. Russian politicians, of course, used the occasion to do a little publicity seeking. They love that. Speaker of the House of the Russian lower chamber of parliament, Volodin, said that those who didn't let a military officer into the restaurant should be sent off to Donbass. And of course, measures were taken. The guy who did this bad deed was fired, which is understandable and correct. And the owner of the restaurant is a well-known Russian restaurant entrepreneur. He's got really good restaurants, actually. He said that the guy who didn't let the officer in was suffering with the guard disease. A small person having a bit of authority sometimes have a tendency to abuse it. So that's why, even though there is no dress code in this restaurant, so it was the initiative, it was done by the initiative of this unfortunate employee. This man was actually invited to his mother's birthday, so they didn't let him to his mother's birthday, even though he wasn't drunk or anything. He wasn't dirty or rude or just a regular person. They didn't let him in. But especially for my American viewers, you can see how society here reacts to these things. Everyone said that he shouldn't have done it, that it was a stupid and bad thing to do. The owner, the politicians, and the majority of society. So there is this sense of unity here. It's really important, I think, to take note of it. Those of you who are looking at Russia as a place to live, it can be said for sure that there is not going to be nothing like what we see, with police officers assaulted on the street with a uniform in the United States. Nothing like this happens in Russia, which is, I suppose, a good thing, I believe. So this was Dmitry the Russian. Please like, subscribe, and thank you.